star this season. Tonight, he showed the world what he could do.
My God, a freshman.
An extra gear for the freshman. Touchdown. And the freshman is off. Foot race. They're looking at shoe bottoms and nothing else. Into the end zone. Touchdown. The freshman just ran it back to Philadelphia.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Future Freshmen Podcast. Welcome to episode 12. And today I bring on a very highly anticipated guest. This is a guy that I've been getting hit up. It's like, hey, when are you going to have him on? Well, he wanted to marinate into the spring games, put out all his wonderful articles, and really give you a good deep dive of some of these players that we have. He also happens to be our team resident Oklahoma guy, so he's going to help us deep dive into that today. Of course, he is the master of IPAs because I don't drink IPAs, but this man is the master of it. It is Mr. Nate Marquise at CFF Nate on Twitter. Nate, welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing, bud?
Thanks for having me on. Master of IPAs may be my favorite nickname introduction I've ever received on a pod, so that's awesome.
Well, now we need to add it to the Twitter handle, so if there's room for letters, I think it should be on there as well.
It's going on the profile, Master of IPAs. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Hey, I'm not afraid to crush a stout either. So yeah, all of that is good to me.
That I can have with you. I'm good on the stouts and I'm good on the sours, not so much on the IPA. So I'll let you be the master of helping me through the hoppiness, basically, as well. But Nate, welcome to the show, man. I know people have been clamoring to have you on. So now you have completed the double of CTNA and now the Future Freshman Podcast. We'll have you on for the CFFU podcast to complete the trifecta, but it's good to have you on, man. Before we get started and we do some deep dive, we have a little bit of housekeeping to go as well. Of course, we want you to visit thecampus2canton.com. There where you're getting weekly articles as well. You're getting everything as far as tools, the ADP. Of course, they have the different tier memberships. I always recommend the NIL, of course, because we'll talk about something here in just a minute that you get access to when you have the NIL membership as well. Rankings, anything to do as far as like bets and props, that's going to be available as well. A lot of my CFFU stuff will be available too. So if you're looking some DFS, you're looking to some prop bets with prize picks, that could be available for you as well. Of course, we have anything to do with college and the NFL side. It's, of course, if you're in a Campus to Canton league, this is the premier website to go check out. So please check that out. That's campus2canton.com. And of course, we have the Debbie Guide that's been on sale since 6/1/2022. So a few days have passed now. It's currently $20. Or if you are one of those NIL subscribers, that should already happened and went to your email. I want to say these guys did a fantastic job. A lot of deep amounts of profile that happened in place. These guys spent a lot of time, and you can definitely see it within the actual write-ups. And of course, shout out to the people behind the scenes like Hannah and those that actually help with the cover and the actual look and feel of the Debbie Guide. So thank you for that. You guys did a fantastic job. I've been able to skim through a couple of these pages, and it's really helped me out a little bit to kind of deep dive even into my NFL fantasy type stuff. Guys already kind of know from the college, but it always helps to have a deeper perspective of people that actually look in the NFL draft stock. So that is nice to have. So go check that out if you can. Of course, they have the link inside campus2canton.com if you just want to purchase that. So please go check out the Debbie Guide. And speaking of guides, we have a CFF guide that's coming out as well. Me, Nate, of course, Jared and Chris, we are deep into the process now of starting to put up these team profiles. We have over 130 teams to work with, so we're kind of steadily moving that along as well. So, be on the lookout for that. We're looking at a July type release, but we'll keep you guys posted as that's going on. Nate, just from doing some of the write-ups that you've done already, what are you looking forward to probably the most out of the guide, coming up here next month?
Well, the thing that I have really enjoyed is I'm diving really, really deep into some of these programs is taking a look at it from an analytical perspective and seeing, exactly what we're looking at from a neutral game script, pass rating versus rush and the line yards created and those types of things are really good to just see, okay, do we see trends here? Is the offensive line performance for Oregon State, who was first in the country last year, in line yards created, is that an anomaly or is that something we tend to see? And how is that going to affect the running back room and those types of things? So being able to kind of dive deep into that element and look at it from that lens has been really kind of eye-opening for me as I go through some of these teams. So I think people really enjoy that, and it really just kind of puts some more just information that they can use, tools in their toolbox to use and be able to analyze and determine how they're going to rank players and that type of thing. So I think it's pretty valuable information on how deep we're going into some of these programs.
Yeah. And just to add to that, for me, having like a Phil Steele type magazine every single year that you can get your hands on, stuff like that. I love like what he does as far as the write-ups. So kind of going to this, just seeing the change and the differences that happen in just a year between programs and being able to see the in and out and the movement and stuff like that. And then the coaching changes and stuff like that. It's really cool to see that. But of course, we're going to bring it to you from a CFF perspective. So I like that. It's kind of like the Phil Steele type situation, but at a CFF lens. And that's something that I'm really stoked about. So I'm glad that, we're going to be putting this out. So just be keeping a lookout for that. Like I said, we're looking at a July release. Of course, I want to give a shout out to our guy, Nicholas Elon Allen at CFB Winning Edge. He supplies us with all the depth charts here that you see as well as offensive and overall team return rate on there as well, as far as the percentages and things like that. So it gives me a more in-depth, accurate one as well. You can start by any of his tiers, but of course, the first tier is only $5 to kind of get you up and running. I highly recommend that. If you're just looking at depth charts, you want to have something that's current, that you can actually get in the, within the time frame of like if someone transfers immediately, it's going to be on the sheet within a day. Or if you're looking at someone that we'll say like a Javon Baker decided he didn't want to be at Kentucky anymore. Now he's in UCF. Boom. Now he's on the sheet for UCF. So now you have him there as well. So you're not missing out on anything here. Nick and his team does a great job. So please go check out patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. And then tell him Brandon, the Future Freshman Podcast sent you. And the guys at C2C is enjoying his work. So keep up the good work. And then of course, we have the promo code CFFU if you're doing prize picks on the app as well. Of course, that's any prop bets that have. I know a lot of us have a lot of good time, especially during the college season, is about finding our favorite ones. So whether that's a prop on yardage that you can do fantasy points, which is probably our favorite and why the CFFU podcast is kind of even there to kind of help you win on your daily basis. Or you can get a matching deposit up to $100. So please go check that out. Like I said, the promo code is at CFFU. And we'll highly appreciate it. So we're going to move on. And we're going to talk about the deep dive, the Oklahoma Sooners. Of course, this is called Dropping the Boom on there as well. So there. I like to do my little puns to go along with it as well. Nate, you ready to dive into your favorite team, good sir?
Yeah, man, I'm stoked. Finally get to talk some freshmen with this incoming class for the Sooners.
I know, man. All right, and we're going to start with Mr. Gavin Salcek, who I think is probably would see the most polarizing, only because he's probably just now starting to make his way towards campus. So we'll talk about him a little bit. We'll kind of deep dive. So let's start with his profile. He's 5'11", 185 pounds. He's the 5th overall running back in the 22 class. He did play in the All-American Bowl as well as the Polynesian Bowl this past year as well. The big thing is the track standout. So he ran 6.78 indoor 60 as a sophomore. He's ran a sub 11 for the 100 yards as well. And then, of course, he's run a 21.81 for the 200 yard as a freshman. So the kid is lightning fast to go along with it. In 2022, he only played 7 games in his junior season, but he did help Valor Christian to a Colorado 5A state runner-up finish. So didn't quite get the job done, but he did get into the mountaintop that goes along with it as well. We had our friend Matt Bruning, who was able to do his write-up here for the actual freshman and supplemental guide, which you can also purchase. So go check that out when you get a chance. But he said he had an impressive high school career, over 4,000 yards combined. And that's something, Nate, that you wrote up in your article as well. And I kind of want to bring that up for those that are doing it. It's the RBU series that we have over at Campus to Canton, where Salcek had a ton of work, but it looks like at the next level, he's probably going to be more of their fast pace. I always think of like a Devin A. Chain, guys like that are just really track stars, very quick, but can get the job done, I guess, when it comes out to those passing down backs type situation. What's your thoughts on Salcek? I know the comparison's Christian McCaffrey because of the same school and things like that. But I know you had some thoughts about Salcek to begin with, but do you kind of agree with the C2C guys and, kind of the community that Salcek is the speed guy? He's going to be behind the curve, but we do expecting maybe some passing work, lining up in the slot or something like that. What's your thoughts here on Salcek as he's coming into the summertime?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the interesting thing is we haven't got to see him yet on campus, unlike Javonte Barnes, who did participate in spring, and we got a look at him, a pretty extensive look at him during the spring game. And yeah, obviously the comparisons are there with Christian McCaffrey, and I don't think that's really fair for Salcek. I think it really has more to do with the fact that they went to the same high school. They're both speed guys, and I will say Salcek catches the ball fairly well out of the backfield. So there could be a role early on for him in that sense. But yeah, I think he's, he's a 10-8, 100 guy. He is a bit of a long strider, but he's able to make some really nice cuts as he gets into that second level without really having to gear down too much, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And he's if you watch the tape, I mean, there's a number of times he throws a pretty strong stiff arm as well. So, but I certainly have my concerns with the size. We're talking about a guy that's 5'11", 180, 185-ish. Wasn't able to get in, like we said, for the spring, so he hasn't hit that strength and conditioning program yet, and he's already kind of behind the curve as it stands with his size, anyways. So I mean, I say that's kind of my biggest concern is he's just undersized and he's a little bit behind the other incoming freshmen. Size and Javonte Barnes are the two main concerns that we have if we're looking to invest in Salcek here.
Yep, absolutely. And I see it. I mean, if he can get down, whether he does receiving work or he can just, bust one of those wide open and kind of get to the edge, I think he has the potential to kind of bust off a big play here and there. I think, it's one of those things where maybe, maybe Major's banged up or maybe Gray's, not doing well. Barnes is taking a breather and Salcek just busts right out the middle. So, right. And we'll talk about the split and stuff like that possibly coming up. But I still think he has – it's going to be boom or bust. It's one of those things where I don't know if we could really ever potentially, have Salcek as like a starting, running back as far as a lineup is concerned in CFF. But he definitely could be a flex play here or there, kind of depending on who they're facing, whether it's an FCS team or someone from the MAC or something like that. Is your same sentiment as well when you kind of look at Salcek, or buried in the chart?
And I think what you said, as far as a guy that can get outside and have throughout the season a handful of really home run type plays, I think it's a really fair assessment on him. He's somebody I like to say he's not an ankle breaker. He's an angle breaker. I mean, guys they have a really tough time tracking down an angle on him because he can generally outrun them and their angles are kind of bad. But I mean, as far as him being an every down back and a guy that could handle a sizable workload, that's where I would have my concerns. He's somebody that you might have even if it gets to the point on down the road in his career where he's splitting time with Javonte Barnes. It might be hard to determine, okay, which game am I going to start him? Which game is going to be the one where he breaks off that 65-yard touchdown run? And then we may have a handful of other games where he gets 8 carries for 29 yards, and he's not getting much of the goal line work because we've got some other guys ahead of him that are just more suited for that type of role.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Nate. So that's a great segue, and we're going to actually move into the actual depth chart that we have here as well. Before we get started, let's break down the FBS offers. Salcek had over 27 offers, which I thought was really good. That's not even including the FCS offers. So he actually had over 30, which I thought was pretty great. Of course, the notes, he's not there till summer, and we kind of drove that home. But I want to talk about the depth chart a little bit. So we lost Kennedy Brooks, who got a great free agent contract with the Eagles, so we wish him well over in the NFL as well. But we are left with Eric Gray, who we thought was going to be the actually starting running back, but he kind of gave way to Kennedy Brooks as Brooks kind of took on the majority of the load. However, Eric Gray has the most starts. He has 12 games started. He did accumulate over 111.1 fantasy points, averaging out to 8.5 fantasy points per game. He is 98% rostered, so most of anyone that's on Fantrax actually does have him. And he's 55% started. So a lot of people are thinking that Eric Gray, of course, now that Kennedy Brooks is out of the way, is there. And of course, his partner there in crime, of course, the other senior is Marcus Major. He has started one game. He only got 10.5 fantasy points last season in 2021, which is only 2.6 fantasy points per game. He is 55% rostered, so people think that there's a majority that thinks Eric Gray does the same thing like last year, and Marcus Major kind of takes over that load. And then, of course, we did talk about Javonte Barnes in episode 5, where we think he's got a fast track to possibly get some action here this year. Of course, he's the freshman. He's 6'0", came in at 190, but from what we're hearing, especially from you, is that he's put on the right amount of weight, the right amount of muscle. He's being highly praised, especially from, I like to call him a fantasy football legend, DeMarco Murray, who helped me to get a couple of championships in the NFL as well. And he's also an Oklahoma guy too. But he's Javonte Barnes already in freshman draft, 78% rostered. I believe I took him in the second round in the mock draft just because I think he has the tangibles to kind of get it done. But looking at this depth chart, and I know we've discussed it sometimes when it comes to the rankings episode and stuff like that, but we're not in favor of probably Eric Gray kind of getting it done this year. Are we kind of in the same thing where you think it's a Marcus Major start, or do you think Barnes just surpasses them in a couple games? What's your thoughts here as far as the depth chart is concerned?
I've been comparing it a lot to, obviously Jeff Lebby comes from Ole Miss. I've been comparing it a lot to the kind of how they divided up shares last year at Ole Miss, where Eric Gray kind of fits that Jerion Ely mold, and Marcus Major, bigger, works well around the goal line, more physical, fits kind of that Snoop Connor mold. And the interesting part is that I think, I had kind of compared Javonte Barnes as the young, the new guy, the Henry Parrish of those three. And by the way, Henry Parrish got over 100 carries last year for Ole Miss. They had 4 guys get over 100 carries. So obviously there's going to be some level of a split, a committee that takes place here. As far as, I would say maybe even at the time, whenever I wrote my State of the RBU article on Oklahoma, that I may have been even a little bit more down on Eric Gray. It's not that I'm warming up to him. I think it's that we didn't get to see Marcus Major in the spring game. He was held out just due to a nagging injury. And we got to see a lot of Javonte Barnes, and the fact that Javonte Barnes just looked really, really good. And I think Eric Gray, no matter what, because of his receiving ability and his ability to create plays in space, and I do think that the new zone scheme that they have there, zone blocking scheme, actually fits his skill set pretty well. Part of me, I guess, is warming up to the idea that Eric Gray will at least get he's secure in getting a lot of snaps early on. I just think he's got that kind of skill set that they're going to be looking for. How he's able to hold on to those snaps as Javonte Barnes starts seeing more and more time will be interesting. Or if Marcus Major plays really well early on, that'll be interesting, because I do have concerns if Eric Gray is a complete back.
Yeah, I'm regardless of the system, whether it's Jeff Lebby or the previous regime and stuff like that. I kind of have this sneaking suspicion that Eric Gray just isn't, capable of holding, that top spot in particular. And
that's fair.
Yeah. And then even in your article, you're really high on Javonte Barnes, thinking that, as a guy that knows the Oklahoma, and knows some of the insiders and stuff like that, they see Barnes as like a top 3 running back. Like they feel like they got gold because they were able to pull him away from a USC and other schools and stuff like that really wanted him. Are you kind of in the same thing where Barnes is just highly coveted, and so they're increasing his workload, hoping that he can become like a Travion Henderson and essentially break out? Or do you think this is Jeff Lebby and systems, or do you think a talent can overcome the system? Is kind of where I'm getting at with the question.
Right. No, I get you. What I think is really interesting, and I don't know that we want to make this, as we talk about Gavin Salcek, a total Javonte Barnes discussion.
No, we'll go back to Salcek.
But I do think it's interesting because that's a good point. Salcek is the higher rated from the recruiting services. Salcek is the higher rated of the two. So I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, what are you talking about? This is the guy that's got the better pedigree. He's going to be the one that gets the reps. Mm-hmm. But all indications from people I trust within the program that talk to some people really deep inside there, and even DeMarco Murray himself, that all along Javonte Barnes was the prize. That's the guy that they wanted. That's the guy that the staff, DeMarco Murray especially, viewed as a top 3 to 5 running back in the country, and that they were going to he was going to be the prize recruit of the offensive side of the ball. So rankings be damned, I guess. I do think that this staff is really interested in what they've seen from Barnes, and the fact, like you mentioned, he was listed at 190. They say he's easy at 205 already. He's putting on good weight, and I've heard a lot of people say that even though from a weight standpoint and what they're listed on the metrics on roster, he already looks like probably the biggest back of the three that were there on campus during spring. So it's kind of crazy. I mean, 205, but I guess he carries it well. I don't know, but he looks a little bit more physically imposing than some of the other running backs.
So has Marcus Major came down in weight a little bit throughout camp, or is he, because of the injury, he's kind of
I don't know
a little bit? Or
I don't know. I mean, like I said, maybe this is just a case of some of the people are just so excited to get a look at Javonte Barnes. That the hype is just kind of going off the rails a little bit. But yeah, I mean, from what I've read, Marcus Major is still pushing that kind of 220-ish range. And Eric Gray's kind of in that 205 to 210 range, and then 205 plus is probably what we're looking at for Javonte Barnes.
So let's dive into some of the CFF and the dynasty aspect of it as well. Just from the mock draft that you kind of were able to kind of see in the episode and stuff like that, do you think 2.5 or second round for Barnes is too high? Are you willing to wait a little longer? Are you willing to zag when people are zigging and maybe take Salcek, hoping that maybe he becomes like an A-chain situation and we have Barnes and Salcek, in a year or two that's just completely dominating? What's your thoughts on draft strategy or like freshmen when it comes to overall value and things like that? What's your thoughts there?
My main strategy is I want the players that are going to play first. I want the players that are going to get on field the fastest and prove that, number one, that shows me that the staff believes they're ready and the staff has confidence in those guys. And number two, it means that as an 18-year-old that, that's just a couple months removed from high school, they're already competing with dudes that have been there for a couple of years. And that's the staff saying these guys are already on at least that level. And that shows me that they have good potential to carry that through and not get over-recruited for the rest of their careers. You see a lot of these guys that are the number 2 running backs that come into, Ohio State or Alabama or whatever the case may be, and they don't get on the field immediately. They can't show what they can do, and then they get over-recruited the next year, and you don't hear from them again until they transfer to a G5 program.
Right.
So that's for me. I don't think taking Barnes, in the second round of that mock. I mean, obviously not it was a 3-person
freshman
mock.
right.
Fresh
available.
So yeah. So I don't think that was a terrible spot for him, because I think all indications are that he is going to play early and he's going to play often. And so he kind of fits that mold. My concern is long-term viability from a fantasy perspective. Jeff Lebby he's had 3 years as the lead play caller. He's yet to show that he's willing to feed one guy. And so my concern would be, is the volume going to be there, or are we going to see a split no matter how good he is? That's kind of the biggest concern for me.
I got you. And as far as Salchek's concerned, would you still take him in later rounds, maybe hoping for a transfer, or hoping that he can be like a receiver at times, or as far as like a flex play? I'm not saying he would be an RB1 or 2 starting in that spot, but right. Flex, are you interested, or you're just passing for now on Salcek?
Yeah, right now I'm probably passing, because I do think that because of his recruiting pedigree and the fact that he is at University of Oklahoma that's produced some nice running backs, I think he's probably getting taken a little bit higher than where I would be comfortable with. Obviously, we're really early. We haven't seen a whole lot of dynasty drafts in order to judge that. But just based off where I've seen him go, even in some C2C leagues, and how some of those guys are pretty confident in his skills, I'm not saying he's somebody that I would fade, but he's somebody that I would only be comfortable taking him a handful of rounds after Barnes, and just hope that the flip side of what we're hoping with Barnes, if you got Barnes, you want that talent, you want him to be that guy, and that he's good enough to where Lebby doesn't carry on that running back by committee. Yeah. Salchuk's kind of the other way. You're kind of hoping that it stays a committee so that he gets a piece of it, and because he's the type of guy, like we talked about earlier, if he can get 10 to 12 carries, he's going to bust off one of those. And then you've got your points. You've got your 10, 11 points off of one run. So, but yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I would certainly be waiting on a little while after Javonte Barnes.
Absolutely. And, just to make reference to C2C, I'm not saying that no one should not even fade. I'm kind of with you. Salchuk, if he gets to the NFL, he has that gadget type play. Like I said, he does have that McCaffrey feel. Not saying he's Christian McCaffrey, but I'm saying, he has that type of pedigree, that type of catching ability that he could be a threat in the NFL. It's just, is people going to see him? So, getting
Right.
those eyes on him, he has to get on the field. So that's going to be the challenge for Gavin Salcek. So all this to, summarize before we move on from the running backfield is that Salcek is very talented, but for now you don't have to take him as a high regard. So for those that aren't reading the articles and stuff like that, definitely can take a value at Gavin Salchuk. It's okay to zag if someone's zigging and going for Barnes. We're just touting that Barnes is probably the likely guy to take in the freshman, at least for this year for the 22 class. Any more thoughts on the running back room before we move on to the quarterback room, sir?
No, I think that's fair. I would just say kind of the big takeaway is don't be totally skewed by the recruiting rankings between the two of them, Salchuk and Barnes. I think Barnes is the one to own between the two, even though he's technically slightly lower rated.
Yep, I kind of agree. I think 24/7 kind of missed the ball a little bit between the two backs, but they rank how they rank. All right. So let's move on. We're going to talk about Mr. Nick Evers. He is the 9th quarterback overall in the 2022 class. In 2020, he was the Texas 6A first team QB selection. So that's a very high touting as well. He's 6'3", which is great. I'd like to see a taller quarterback that can kind of see over the O-line. He is coming in as a 186. I haven't heard reports, so I'm going to pass it off to Nate. Have you heard anything as far as Evers gaining any muscle mass or getting a little bit bigger, or is he kind of still staying at the same weight from what you've been told?
Yeah, I haven't heard much as far as his weight gain. From what I've heard, he's got a little ways to go as far as developing his body right now.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. And I also heard, and we'll talk about it, but General Booty coming in as well as far as the transfer. Yes, that's a real name. I know you hear it every podcast, but General Booty is a legit name. Probably one of the best names ever.
It's a very legit name. It's the most legit name.
Not as cool as Dicker the Kicker from Texas, but I mean, it's pretty close up there. But Nick Evers, he plays with a good confidence. So that's what I thought I saw in the tape. I think Matt Bruning here that did the write-up agrees as well. He's an RPO kind of guy that's really good for campus to Canton and then for those that are enjoying the pros as well. He throws his motions a little lower. So that's what Matt's kind of writing is that could cause over some turnover. So Oklahoma will have the advantage of developing that type of situation. I think Levy can be the guy that kind of helps him out there as well too. But as a freshman, immediately Dylan Gabriel transfers in. He saw the spot. Of course, he had some of the exodus there at OU. Venables comes in. Gabriel immediately slides in. Levy's like, hey, we play your style. You want to come on in? And then Gabriel's like, yes, sir. I'll come right on in. And I'm stoked because I had Dylan Gabriel sitting on the bench thinking I was never going to play the man again. Now I have the starting quarterback for Oklahoma. So it works out in your favor if you're patient, right? But Nick Evers I see as a development type situation. Now Oklahoma is always on the track for 4 or 5-star guys. So, what's your thoughts as far as like Evers staying with the program? Do you think they recruit over top of him? What's your thoughts on Evers kind of sticking around and kind of being that guy maybe after we see Gabriel exit? Do you see a battle between Evers and Booty, or do you think someone's coming in basically and we might see kind of the same mold or same blueprint that we saw this past offseason?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, obviously the thing I think you have to like about Nick Evers is that he was handpicked by the new staff. This wasn't somebody that was already committed to OU. In fact, he was committed to Dan Mullen down at Florida. And obviously when there was a change of staff there, he decommitted, and then he became one of the main targets for Jeff Levy. And they were able to actually get him pretty quick. Him and somebody else that we're going to talk about, the wide receiver Gibson, were a package deal. So, I definitely think that there's something to that whenever the staff has handpicked him, and that he runs in high school. He's ran a very similar system to what Jeff Levy runs. Yep. So I think all that is those are pros. That's good indications that he could stick at OU. But obviously, since since the spring practice has ended, the staff has clearly sent a message by signing 2 new quarterbacks. They got Bevel from Pitt as a transfer, and then, as you mentioned, they got General Booty, one of the top JUCO quarterbacks, to come in. So that's a really good indication that they don't believe that they're ready for Nick Evers to be the backup quarterback should something happen to Dylan Gabriel, which, as we saw last year for Dylan Gabriel, is always there's always potential for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as him being over recruited, yeah, I mean, OU's already got Jackson Arnold, who's also a 4-star. He's a top 10 quarterback coming in next year. We're probably looking too far into 2024, but I know they're pushing really, really hard for DJ Lagway, which is a top 3 quarterback. He's a 5-star guy. So not to say that Lagway would come in and push, a 3rd-year QB, but I mean, I do think that it's not out of the question that Arnold comes in and competes with him. I don't think it's out of the question that if General Booty gets a fair amount of run this year in either cleanup time or spot, time just due to injury or whatever, that he could take the lead going into next year against Evers. So to answer your question, I don't think it's out of the question that Nick Evers is having to battle for this job. I don't think it's given that he's for sure going to be the guy moving into 2023.
Yeah. It looks like in Brooding's write-up that he thinks it should be his at 2023 at the latest, but this was before, the 2 transfers coming in. So there was a lot more competition, whereas it was just Evers and Gabriel at the time of this writing. So just for perspective purposes, as we're looking into that as well. So of course we have his stats: 4,944 passing yards, 40 passing touchdowns, 383 passing completions. He did have 14 interceptions total. He did have 6 overall fumbles as far as a senior. That's what's in Brody's write-up because of his, bringing it a little bit lower. That's something that helped to develop. According to CFB Winning Edge, this is the lineup. We of course have Gillen Gabriel, who's the transfer senior. Well, 25 games started at UCF, 102.1 fantasy points, 34 fantasy points per game, and that was just 3 games with UCF this past season before the injury. I had him on the roster. He was my guy. I went up high for him when we did our dynasty and stuff. Of course, he went down with injury. My heart broke. Lost Mo Ibrahim in the same week. It was brutal. So it happens, but now I have them both back. So patience, I guess.
It's gonna work out just fine for you. I'm not gonna be shedding any tears right now.
You shouldn't, but we'll talk about injury here in a second. Right. So Gabriel's 100% rostered. Like, he's completely gone. He's 65% starting. He is in my starting lineup, so I'm one of those 65% as well. Of course, we're talking about General Booty, who's coming in from the JUCO, one of the top-rated one as well. Came from Tyler Junior College. Of course, right now he's completely free. Right now I know a lot of people are doing supplemental with their actual freshman drafts, or if you split them up, he's completely available if he doesn't go drafted. This is a free pickup on Fab, and then you don't have to spend a lot of money, I don't think, because people aren't going to really clamor. They might get the name just because they want the name on the roster. Is like, hey, I roster General Booty, but that's probably where I can see where the name comes. And then, of course, you got the sophomore, Micah Bowens, 0 games started. He is a 3-star recruit. He did transfer out from Penn State, so he is 2% rostered. So some people are thinking that Micah Bowens might be a sleeper in the potential as well. But let's face it, Dylan Gabriel, he did have that, I believe, was the collarbone issue. Once that cracks, it's easier to do it again. And so that's where my concern is. Do you think Gabriel completes all 12 games, or do you think he has some lingering issues from the past at UCF, or do you think he's bigger and badder than ever now, and you think he can kind of complete the season? What's your thoughts there on Gabriel as the Oklahoma starter?
I don't really have concerns as far as his injury. Yeah, I mean, he did fracture collarbone. That's really not something that we're not talking like ligamentous, like right. An ACL. It's not a reoccurring ankle or anything like that. So no, I don't have any concerns as far as that. I do know that he's bulked up quite a bit as he entered the Oklahoma strength program. So he's I think physically he looks great. So I don't have any concerns with that.
That's great to hear, man. That makes me happy, Cantor, for sure. How about Micah Bowens? He's kind of like the sleeper in the process there. Do you think the transfer from Penn State to here was a good landing spot? Do you think he's depth and that kind of he knows it, or do you think he has a starting shot with Booty and Evers here next year as Gabriel moves on? What's your thoughts there with Bowens?
No, I think it's a pretty strange transfer, to be honest with you. To go from being Penn State's QB3, it's actually eerily similar to Bevel. Like you're the QB3 on your own program. The best you're probably going to be is QB3 at Oklahoma. Bowens is super athletic. And he's somebody that I keep asking around to find out, okay, are they maybe now that they've added Booty and Bevel and they've got Evers coming in now, like, could we see him switch over to another position? Could he be a slot guy? Could he just kind of fill kind of a chess piece role where they just kind of play him all over the field, and maybe maybe they're able to toss the ball, have him throw the ball a little bit, just kind of a gadget guy. Haven't heard that that's going to happen yet, but no, I don't anticipate he's somebody that we see taking snaps under center very much this year.
I gotcha. And then with General Booty coming in from Tyler Jr., do you think that's more of a depth, or was that to challenge those quarterbacks? Kind of like we talked about. Do you think Booty pushes for the starting role because he is, such a highly touted JUCO guy coming in? What's your thoughts there on him?
Pushes this year?
No, next year because
okay, yeah. I was gonna say absolutely, and he's definitely not pushing Gabriel. No, I think they brought him in to be the 2 this year. I don't think that they. I mean, all the practice reports we heard from spring on Nick Evers is, they weren't great, to be honest with you. Not that they were saying that he didn't have a chance to ever be something special at OU, but all the indications were is that he's quite a bit behind and not quite there, whether it's physically, whether it's his reads, whatever the case may be. He's just not quite ready yet. And so I definitely think they brought in Booty to be the QB2 this year, should something happen to Gabriel. So, so I think that puts him in line at the very least to strongly be in the competition with Evers and potentially Jackson Arnold, depending on how he looks when he comes in the spring. Yeah. And I don't think it's out of the question that if they're not super stoked about any of these guys, or if they think Arnold's the guy but he's just not ready yet, that they don't dig back into the transfer portal again next year. Right. I mean, that's the world we live in now with college football.
Yep, it's a free agency almost year round. It feels like, for sure. Right. Let's tie this back to Evers. You kind of saw in the mock draft where he didn't really go in the first 3 rounds. But he was being considered, I think as we got into the 4th, maybe 5th or 6th round, people would start piquing interest in Nick Evers. I mean, why would you not take the shot, especially with, he's got great tangibles. I mean, he would fit the system really well. So it's a systems type situation, just like you saw, especially Jared, he's a big on systems guy. And I know you're a big systems guy too at times too, but do you think Evers is worth maybe a top 7 rounds, or do you think you just hope he falls and just take the value there? Or do you think it's a complete pass on Evers and just wait for Arnold maybe in the 2023 freshman draft? What's your thoughts there?
I don't think it's a complete pass just because of that. I wouldn't say Konami code, but there's a really, really high ceiling if he wins this job, because he's got that same type of athleticism that we saw out of Matt Corral last year. This is a guy that if given, I think if he got the job, he would be given 150 carries. And if given 150 carries, I don't think 700 yards and 10 touchdowns is totally out of the equation. I think that's within his range of outcomes. So anytime you've got a dual threat Jeff Levy quarterback option, you need to take a stab at it. So I mean, he's somebody I could picture in freshman drafts, going in kind of that round 4 to 6 range. Somebody that's comfortable with the risk of knowing that he's not going to play year 1 and that he's probably going to have a little bit of a battle on his hands for year 2. But if he wins that battle, it's kind of sky's the limit type scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like if he's starting to drop, I mean, and you don't see like a big quarterback, because you got to read the room, you got to look at how your league mates are doing, stuff like that. So if they're taking quarterbacks left and right, it might be a good time to go ahead and snatch Evers up just to have him, stash him in the bench and stuff like that. But there's no quarterback run, and he's going like seventh round. Take the value. I mean, I think it's worth a shot. I mean, at seventh round, you're not really worried about hitting every single one. I mean, you want to. But that's where the first 3 or 4 rounds you kind of want to hit on your guys and make sure that you have people that have a fair shot at, getting the playing time and the opportunity for sure. So keep an eye on Evers. We think that he's, definitely capable of being drafted, but just temper expectations that he may or may not get the spot he's going to have to fight for. So kind of keep that in mind. Any last thoughts on the QB room before we move to the wide receivers, good sir?
No, I think we've covered it all.
All right, let's move on. And of course, this is the package deal. So we got to talk about Jaden Gibson. So of course, he's a 4-star recruit, 24/7 Sports grade, had him at 0.9291. He's a 6'5" wide receiver. He came in at 191 pounds, 27th overall wide receiver in the 22 class. This is where, I started to, my eyes lit up a little bit more. So he's a 3-sport athlete. So he does basketball, he does, of course, football and track. And so that's all the ones where it's a lot of hand-eye coordination and a lot of speed. So he was the 2021 the go-to target for West Orange there. They did win the district there, went 11-2. And of course, he played in the Sunshine State's 8A classification. He did average 15.3 yards per catch, which I think is pretty outstanding. 2020, he was the key player for West Orange squad that went 6-4, and they made the state playoffs. So as he's progressed, he's always seen playoff potentials and stuff like that. Alfred did his write-up, and he said he seems to be less than some of his parts. So he has a tantalizing individual traits such as hands, length, and deep. But he says he projects towards a outside X. Do you kind of see that as like an X and not a Y or, the Z type spot? Or do you think he's more one-dimensional? Do you think he has the capable of putting all those traits together? That's where Alfred sees the discontinuing of Jaden Gibson, is that he has all these tangibles, but he's not putting them together. I just think that's development and when you get to college and they just put it all together for him. He sees him as a wide receiver too down the road. What's your thoughts on Gibson and this fit as far as for Oklahoma? And do you think his tangibles will all kind of add up and he can kind of play that X spot? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think from the tape that I've watched on Jaden Gibson, that I think Alfred's assessment there is pretty fair and pretty accurate from what I've seen. He's a guy that in high school has been able to beat people with his beat cornerbacks with his size and speed, and not really have to show much refinement in his game, not have to show much route running. He could be a little inconsistent at times with his hands because he can just straight up tower over guys, and has good speed that where he can just run go routes all day long and be very, very successful at it. So that was the interesting thing with spring practices. Okay, how is he going to respond at that next level, going up against P5 level defensive backs and that type of thing? And all reports seem to be pretty good that he was working hard to refine his game. So I think that's a positive sign, and something that Alfred probably didn't have the information on whenever he had done that write-up. So. Yeah. So I think that's good. But yeah, he's going to be a boundary guy just based off of his physique. He's not going to be somebody that is going to tantalize you with his ability after the catch or even be able to really cut in and out of breaks at an elite level. But he's somebody that has, he's 6'5" already, has potential to be in that kind of 210, 215 weight range, which is really nice. Somebody that can be just a bigger red zone target that has the speed to also make plays down the field.
Yep. And has he been able to add any weight? Is he still around the 190, or have you heard reports where he's moved up some?
I think he's added a little bit of weight. I don't, from what I've heard, it's not like significant, but I think that they're pleased so far with the direction of him being able to put on good weight.
Yeah, at 191, that's still really good. But if you can get 200 and gain the muscle, He had, what we talked about, he has the height. 6'5" is fantastic. I mean, if you see these big body receivers, man, that can just get out and kind of just a tower above, even if you have harder competition with the corners and stuff like that, sometimes you just need a high pointed, and boom, you got a good catch. So as long as he's gaining that, I'm really interested in Gibson here in the coming years as well. So let's talk about, what he's got to go up against. But first, his had 1,631 total receiving yards, 18.5 average receiving yards per game, 22 receiving touchdowns, had 35 FBS offers, man. That is ridiculous. And I didn't even get to the FCS because I had to count, down the road how many that he had. So he was still highly touted. So, regardless of how raw he is, I think he's, still a guy that everyone wants to have on the roster. And it just made it easier for Oklahoma to put in the package deal with Evers and Gibson kind of together. I think that's a really good pairing there as well. But we have some returning players that are starting up as well. So, of course, we have the returning junior. Of course, that is Marvin Mims. 14 games started, 134 fantasy points. That is 10.3 fantasy points per game. He's 98% rostered, and he's 88% started. A lot of people think that Marvin Mims is the go-to guy at Oklahoma, and him and Gabriel are going to light it up. Are you opposed to that at all, or do you think Marvin Mims is the clear breadwinner in the situation, or do we see some of these guys that we'll talk about here in just a minute kind of feeding into that and where it's spread out more often? What's your thoughts here? You've kind of seen the Jeff Lebby system, so what's your thoughts as the new OU kind of puts itself together?
Yeah, Mims is that dude. He's going to be the guy. Yeah, he's in my opinion, he's the clear wide receiver one, and that's valuable. That's valuable in a Jeff Lebby offense. We saw, obviously we saw what Elijah Moore and Ontario Drummond did for Lebby at Ohio State. They were amazing. Lebby has a system where he runs. That's the thing. While they run, upwards of 85 to 90 plays a game, they finished, top 5 in the country in plays per game and pace the last couple of years. They don't really sub out wide receivers as much as you might think. They play the same 3 dudes for a big portion of that, and he demands that his wide receivers are in great shape because of that. And you get peppered with targets whenever you're a starting wide receiver in Lebby's offense, especially if you're the clear-cut number one, like we saw from Moore and Drummond, and even Gabriel at Central Florida, who's over there at the Bills now. So yeah, I think Mims is that dude, and I think he's in store for a really nice season.
Yeah, to put it into context, we also had Mario Williams. Of course, Mario Williams is now at USC. So even with Mario Williams there, Marvin Mims still averaged 10.3 fantasy points per game. So I do expect that to go up, more into, would you say 14 fantasy points per game, or would you say even higher than that as we go into that? What's your thoughts there as far as, I guess you would say the overall production as far as who would catch what? Mims being the guy, do you think he's capable of a 15 fantasy point average, or do you think it would be kind of just under that? What are you thinking?
Hard for me to say as far as point. That kind of depends on your scoring system or whatnot. Sure. But I think Marvin Mims is a borderline top 10 CFF wide receiver this year.
There you go.
So, however your scoring system is, he's somebody that I would definitely target within the first 8 to 10 wide receivers off the board.
Yes. So I think that 88% started needs to jump up probably to about 95% for sure. Let's talk about Theo Whis, because I'm interested, because I did hold Whis for a whole year. He did go down in injury in 2021, so he just completely did not play at all. He did have 11 games started in the previous year as well. He is 90% rostered. I am one of those guys. It's 22% started. I am intrigued. I have him in a flex, but I would be interested in maybe playing a wide receiver. Tell me what you think about Theo Whis. How's he doing in camp? Is he looking better, much improved? Do you think he becomes more of the Mims role like Mims was last year with Mario? Do you think that kind of 1-2 pairing, or do you think this is a Farouk situation where he comes in as the sophomore and kind of takes over wide receiver too? What's your thoughts there?
So he's healthy. All indications are he's looking good. He's going to be ready to go, and it's going to be. I think the clear. I'm kind of jumping the gun when I'll just add Farouk into kind of this mix. Sure. I think the clear top 3 are Mims, Theo Whis, and Farouk. I think those are going to be the guys that get the bulk of the play, like I mentioned with Lebby and how he likes to feature 3 guys. Whis and Farouk will be on the outside. Mims will be on the inside. as far as being able to differentiate between Mims and Farouk, I mean, I'm sorry, Whis and Farouk, it's just going to be interesting to see how Whis's experience plays and how much Gabriel's going to be able to trust in him because of that. I think from a raw ability, in speed and being able to make break big plays and stuff like that, I actually think Farouk might be better in that sense, but there's always a chance that Gabriel is, going to trust the more experienced player. Here's another thing that I've also considered too. Early indications is that Whis is going to play on the boundary to the left of Gabriel. Farouk will be to the right. Normally I don't get into that's just semantics. Gabriel's a lefty, and everything I've heard, I haven't broken down film with him at UCF, but everything I've heard, he peppers deep balls to the left. He isn't as comfortable going across his body over to the right side. If that's the case, and we see that pretty steady configuration with Whis out to the left, then that stands to be I would think a positive thing for him if he's going to be one of the first checkdowns or one of the first options that Gabriel goes to before he checks the ball down. So I mean, right now I would give a little bit of a heads up for Whis over Farouk at this point.
Yeah, just for those that aren't watching on the YouTube, like as far as percent started on Fantrax, it's really separated by 2%, 24% actually for Farouk, 22% for Whis. So a lot of people are high on Farouk and the ascension that's really going on there. I think, this year he's into the wide receiver 3. I think next year, honestly becomes his time because Whis and Marvin, more than likely Marvin Mims, if I was smart with him, with the draft stock, I would probably take the NFL draft, whereas Whis is a senior, so regardless if he graduates or he goes to the NFL, they both are gone. So Farouk's in for a massive season in 2023, but he's definitely ascending now. Let's talk about a couple of honorable mentions. So we have a couple of transfers coming in. LV Bunkley-Shelton, of course, I believe he's from Minnesota? The Gophers, right?
No, he's from Arizona State.
Well, I don't blame him for leaving Arizona State whatsoever. We also have.
I'm sure their campus is nicer than Norman.
Yeah, but you see the situation going on there.
But there's a lot of dumpster fires happening on their football field. So
yes, that's absolutely correct. You also have Drake Stoops, who's one of the fan favorites as well, and JJ Hester, who transferred in as well. So you got some guys that definitely got the depth. Levy's not the guy like Ryan Day where he does the hockey thing where he just swaps 3 out, type situation. So do you think Bunkley-Shelton, I know he's coming into, at least a better opportunity, I would say probably, and better quarterback play for sure. Do you think he sees the field at all, or do you think he's kind of a guy that sits? Does he take a red shirt and just kind of waits it out? What are your thoughts on Bunkley-Shelton?
No, I think they'll play him. I don't know how much or how much he's going to play a role this year. I definitely think he is a guy to look for to break out more next year in 2023. Yeah. But yeah, it would probably have to be something where somebody's going to have to go down, or Whis just doesn't look himself like pre-injury, right. Theo Whis, or Farouk just doesn't live up to some of the expectations that I think the staff and the fans have for him right now. So I wouldn't count out JJ Hester or LV Bunkley-Shelton getting some run this year, just because there is some uncertainty on those outside receiver positions.
Right.
So, but I do think right now they're probably sitting as wide receivers 4 and 5.
I got you. And then Drake Stoops, he's kind of the depth piece there, or is he?
Yeah, he'll back up. He'll back up Mims, and he'll get some run whenever Mims needs a breather. And he's one of those guys. The staff, I'm sure, trusts Drake Stoops to make some plays here and there. But he definitely, if he's getting the bulk of the snaps, and something probably went wrong for
yeah. So, bringing it back to Gibson, and, you see the depth chart, stuff like that. Where do you think he fits in 2023? Well, obviously, this is probably going to just be kind of like the way that Austin says, like a zero, year 1-0 type situation for a wide receiver for Jaden Gibson. But do you think he's got the chance to hit 2023, or do you think he's a development and then 2024, if him and Evers are still around, where that's kind of his breakout? What's your thinking process of Gibson kind of as the depth chart starts to turn over with the eligibility and things like that?
Well, I mean, obviously things have changed a little bit for him and his likelihood to play early over the last, we're sitting here in early June. Over the last few weeks, we've seen OU snag Hester and LV Bunkley in from the transfer portal. So that has kind of pushed him down just due to their experience and their skill set and that type of thing. More than likely, that's pushed Jaden Gibson down the pecking order a little bit. But I mean, he's raw. He needs to develop. This is going to give him time to develop. I don't expect much from him out of year one. That being said, he does carry a unique size and skill set that none of the other wide receivers on staff have. I mean, at 6'5", he towers. And that was I will say that a lot of the spring practice reports for the reporters that would get in and get a look to see what everybody's looking like, everybody came back and said, oh my God, Jaden Gibson is a monster among boys from the size. Even just standing in line, he looks like it's not hard to pick him out. So that said, I don't think it's out of the question that he could get some run in some particular packages near the red zone, near the end zone. Either him or true freshman Caden Helms, who's also of similar size, could be somebody that splits out and is somebody that gets jump balls in the corner of the end zone type deal. So, but that's probably his ceiling for 22. 23, I think he's very much going to be in the mix as we see Whis and Mims move on as somebody that has a chance to take a big step forward. And like we talked about, kind of like with Evers, it's a levy system that the ceiling is pretty high, and you might want to invest in just for the hopes that guy becomes the next man up.
Yeah. I see Gibson kind of slipping too as far as drafts and stuff like that is concerned, especially if you're doing supplemental. You could probably catch him in later rounds. What round would you kind of consider comfortable taking Gibson? Would you kind of move up because you know if he hits, he's there, or are you gonna kind of just play on the value and hope that people kind of forget about him like they do with Salcek and just kind of grab it on the value? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody that I'm probably, just like I said, because of the new wide receivers that are coming in, we're not going to get to see as much of him this year. I always like to say, okay, if I draft this guy, and like I want to draft expecting that his value is more a year from the time that I took him. If I think his value is going to be the same, then I'm probably not that interested in him. So I think he's somebody that his value, we could see a rise in his value because of Mims and Whis moving on. He could slide into that starting role next year. So, but yeah, I mean, right now I'm still waiting for the right value with him and probably waiting, probably in that round 8 to 10 range, somewhere in there, just kind of seeing where he falls.
Yeah. If we were going to do the 4 through 7, say a mock draft on that one, honestly, he would. I mean, he's on the list, but he definitely would fall probably 8, 9 for me as well. So I definitely in agreement there as well. Looking at the return of production, thanks to Nick and CFB winning the edge there. Overall, Oklahoma has 57.23 returning, which is the 90th ranked in the FBS, but conference rank is pretty fit. That's pretty solid. It's in the top 100. Offensive return, though, 46.24. And FBS ranked, of course, 114th. A lot of that has to do, that's not just, the wide receiver, running back, quarterback, that's also O-line, tight ends and stuff like that. Looking at this in particular, you have a lot coming back. An offensive return is almost at 50%. There's a lot of room to grow. And just kind of to touch on a previous episode, we talked about Caden Helms with Chris Moxley. And I know in our Slack chat that you brought up Caden Helms. Before we move on and talk about the big fish, small pond, what's your thoughts on the tight end room real quick on Oklahoma? Do you still think Helms is doing it, or do you think some of the tight ends have kind of caught up since spring and stuff like that as far as who might be starting this year? What's your thinking on the tight end room as we move on?
My opinion hasn't really changed much on the tight ends. I think that Braden Willis will be the tight end one this year. I think that Parker will be used in mostly blocking specific. Daniel Parker, he's the transfer from Missouri. I think he'll use mostly as a blocking type role. And I think Caden Helms has the potential to see the field, in bits and pieces throughout the season as somebody that splits out. Right now, he's not ready to take a spot on the line and block P5 edge rushers and that type of thing. But I think he's somebody that they'll split out, find a role for. He'll get some time late in games just to kind of see what he's made of. But they like what they see out of him from a pass catcher perspective. So, which is obviously from CFF perspective, that's what we want. We want a guy that'll get out there and get you, 50 plus catches as a tight end. So, I think there's from the tight end, the incoming tight end class. He's somebody that I would definitely be targeting as a top 5 tight end in this class for Dynasty CFF.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely honestly, I would think about Helms versus like a Gibson. Almost, I don't know, maybe in the similar rounds, but I would say probably I would target Helms a tad bit more than I would Gibson immediately. So just thoughts there as well. But, I wanted to give you a nice, pretty picture here on YouTube of Oklahoma. See the red and white around as you saw it as well. So, but great returning production. Looks like Oklahoma's in good hands. It looks like the crossover, between going to Venables and now with Levy in the system. I think it was a great transition. I know it looked sketchy there at first, but it looks like they're all coming together, especially on an offensive standpoint. So it's good to see Oklahoma bounce back so quickly. All right,
I think I can see my old college house, the roof from
were you in the apartments in the back?
The apartments to the back and slightly to the left. We used to on game days. It was nice. We were a stone's throw away from the stadium, so we could charge for parking and we had our whole fall rent paid for just off parking alone because of the 5 or 6 Saturdays out of the year. So
that's pretty awesome. That's cool that we could catch the apartment on there. I bet the tailgating was fantastic, man. You could probably hear the game right outside the yard.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. That's cool, man. And look at, we saw what it was in the spring game, man. They fill up that stadium real fast there at Oklahoma. So
people are excited, man.
They should be. You guys got a sick roster, so I'm pretty stoked, especially for my Wii shares, and hopefully I could grab up some Barnes. We'll see how it goes as well. So, all right, man. You ready for the big fish, small pond?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. All right, we're going to talk about Mr. Jalen Moss. He is a 3-star athlete. 24/7 Sports graded him had it at 0.8741. He is committed to the Fresno State Bulldogs. The guy is 6'1", 164 pounds. We'll talk about that in just a second. That's probably, I think, where he dropped a little bit. But he's 88th overall wide receiver in the 22 class. He's the highest rated recruit class for the 2022 class for Fresno State, which I thought was very interesting. So when I was looking for big fish, small pond, of course, I looked for G5. I looked for a guy that's still rated fairly highly as far as 24/7 is concerned, but still has an opportunity to go along with it as well. 2021 stats, he has 1,127 yards, 58 catches. He averaged 93.9 yards per game. Of course, this was high school. 19.4 yards per catch, which was even greater than, I believe, Gibson that we talked about, and he had 15 touchdowns. So he did start the 29 games. He had plenty of time. He helped lead his college there to 9-3, 5-0 conference record in the season as well. But here's the interest. He had Arizona State. I see why he chose Fresno State. There's Nebraska, though, which I think was a decent opportunity. Oregon State as well. Colorado State, who, just has a pretty decent. Colorado State has a good wide receiver at least every single year for the most part. Nevada, I know there's change over there, so he might have got offers from both. And then UNLV. So, I mean, he's had some pretty decent ones. The kid is looks like he's a California kid, so he's going to stay on the West Coast. But that's some pretty good names in the FBS to go along with it as well. There is a changeover as far as Tedford becoming the new head coach. Of course, DeBoer, I believe, has gone to Washington, but that still has a lot of the same returning stuff, and we'll talk about that. Of course, we have Jalen Cropper, who is the returner. He is the senior, the wide receiver. He started 15 games. Amazing season, 266.5 fantasy points, 20.5 fantasy points per game, 100% roster, 73% started. I don't see why you wouldn't have Cropper there. I know. Where did you have Cropper rated overall, Nate, on yours? Was he top 15 or was he
with my wide receivers?
Yeah, with your wide receivers.
No, I'm probably actually I think we talked about this. I'm maybe the lowest
that's right.
of our group. I think I'm somewhere around like 22, 23, something like that on him. My concerns are more with Tedford than it is Cropper's ability, but
right.
Yeah, I'm probably the lowest.
Yeah. If you're right and he goes top 20 wide receivers, I still think that's a really good season and definitely a wide receiver that we can see roster. Of course, he's a senior, so they're looking for people as well. They also got Nico Remigio. He's a senior as well. 17 games started. He did transfer from Cal. He did have 85.5 fantasy points and 7.8 fantasy points per game with California. He's 2% rostered, 2% started. So if you're looking for a flyer or maybe someone that might have a second option. But one of my favorites as far as the backup, of course, is Josh Kelly. He's the wide receiver out of junior. Great supplemental guy if you can get him as well. However, there's some smart people that are out there that already have him in Dynasty, so we can't get him in supplemental because he's already been taken. But 13 games started, 149.8 fantasy points, which is 11.5 fantasy points per game. That's pretty solid. 43% rostered, 8% started, so a lot of people are thinking Josh Kelly is going to be a great flex play for CFF this year, even with Cropper there as well. Do you think with Jalen Moss, because he's 164. From what I've heard, he's moved up to maybe 170 something, but it hasn't been a lot. Fresno State isn't like Oklahoma where you can, have the weight type program, but they're still fairly credible. Do you think because of Tedford that it can't bolster, 2 wide receivers, or do you think it goes back to where they're just focusing on the connection between Cropper and Haener, or what's your thinking there when it comes to Fresno State and the outlook for this year? We'll start with that first.
For this year, I have a fair amount of confidence with it. I mean, you've got Jake Haener, who's been around plenty long and has been very productive, and he's got his guys. I mean, that's there shouldn't be a massive drop off from DeBoer to Tedford in year one because the pieces are all in place there. Haener, Cropper, Pope, Kelly. I mean, that's Ty Jones. I mean, there's some really nice pieces there. Jordan Mims catches the ball really well at the backfield. I mean, some really nice pieces there. So I would be surprised if there's a massive drop between as year one under Tedford. My concerns are more long term. Okay, next year we're another year removed from DeBoer and we lose Haener. How does that passing game look then? Do they bring in a transfer quarterback? Just kind of what that situation plays out. So that would be long term more of my concern than I am concerned for 2022.
I got you. The reason why I want to bring up Jalen Moss is I see opportunity. So you have Cropper, who's a senior. Riminjo is the transfer. He's a senior. Josh Kelly is a junior. If Josh Kelly has an incredible season along with Jalen Cropper, I could see Kelly maybe looking into the NFL. I see more Kelly as the returner. So next year, I see Josh Kelly as, the wide receiver one. But Jalen Moss has a lot of the same stature, size, and a lot of the same tangibles as they're pretty much when they were talking about his recruiting stuff out there. The coaches were talking how Jalen Moss kind of fits as that guy that could be a Jalen Cropper replacement as the years kind of go on. So that sparked my interest a little bit more. Now he has a lot more, beefing up to do to kind of fit into his mold at 6'1". If he was up in near 190 or even 185, I think that'd be great. A lot of people don't know that Jalen Cropper only sits at 180 something pounds. So I mean, to be as good as he is, he's not, the most beefiest wide receiver, but he doesn't have to be because he gets it done, as far as his route running and stuff like that. Jalen Moss has pretty clean looking tape from what I saw for the most of it. There's still room for improvement and stuff like that, but he was pretty crisp as far as like getting off the line and separating himself and stuff like that. And to be one of the highest recruited guys in, the 2022 class, Fresno State, they can't just have everyone coming to him. So they're very, picky and choosy about who they choose. So, that's kind of where I see where Jalen Moss comes in. I do see a transfer process with Fresno State. I know they have I forget who it was. It was the guy that the boys. He just did the Elite 11 one for us. Kevin Coleman. So he did. He's a Fresno State guy. So he's saying that one of the recruits coming in as the 4-star looks pretty promising. But I could see where Tedford could probably pull maybe the Washington connection. You never know. You might see someone transfer out of there, things like that. But I think Moss, if given a decent quarterback, has the opportunity to kind of make that happen. I'm not saying it's this year. It maybe with an injury or something like that. But, I'm saying in 2023, he definitely has the opportunity. And the kid's not going drafted at all. He's barely even talked about. Like I said, I had to kind of scroll down to find him there at the 88th position there over a wide receiver. But he's got the tangibles. If someone hits on him and just stashes him away, this possibly could pay off. Do you kind of have the same mindset, or do you completely just kind of be a wait and see or hands-off approach for Fresno State? Or are you kind of looking to maybe invest because of what you've seen in the past, hoping that it would kind of be? I know you said Tedford's different from DeBoer. I know that, but what do you think overall as far as Moss having the opportunity, I guess, to be a CFF asset? What you think?
Yeah, so he's a guy that's been on my radar for a little bit now, but I was able to take a little bit deeper dive as you put him here that we were going to be talking about him. I mean, the first thing I gravitate towards when I'm looking at these G5 guys is, okay, what does your offer sheet look like?
Right.
And as you mentioned, you rattled off a number of those P5 programs, and that Oregon offer looks really, really salty. I mean, when you're looking at G5 guys, and you've got somebody like, I mean, Nebraska offers everybody, so I don't care about that. They literally offer everybody. But Oregon, man, Oregon State, those are two really nice offers.
Yeah.
So that interests me. Even though he's only 160, 165, I watch his tape and it doesn't concern me that much. He's got a decent frame. I think he's going to put on weight during his time. I don't think it's going to affect his movement skills. So I'm not, even though he's 165, I'm not concerned about it. I love the fact that he's 6'1", 6'6'1". That's good. I think he's going to put on some weight and be a guy that pushes, 185, 190 by the time he's a junior. So, and I like his ball skills. I like, that he's able to, beat people deep. He's got some really nice hands. There's a lot to like. I'm with you. I don't know how much he's going to be able to play a role just because of how many wide receivers they have coming back this year. But next year, we could be looking at sky's limit. I will say, you've mentioned a couple times that Cropper is a senior. Cropper does have another year of eligibility after
he might be a super
year.
senior.
Yeah, so he's because of COVID and all that, he actually has 2 years of eligibility left.
Wow.
But Zane Pope is on his last season. Ty Jones is on his last season. Josh Kelly will more than likely be back, I would think, unless something changes. But either way, I mean, you're looking at wide receiver 2. If Cropper were to come back, I would say that's probably 50-50. But I mean, even if you're looking wide receiver 2 or 3 at the worst next year.
Yeah.
And I think he's got a skill set and a size that you don't generally see at Fresno State. So it would not surprise me at all if he's one of their go-to playmakers next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the actual Fresno State return production, and once again, thanks to Nick, Fresno State's got a decent stadium for those watching on YouTube. It's not bad looking at all. So overall, they're 75.68% returning production. That's 17th in FBS, and the conference rank that's absolutely first. Of course, their offensive returning is 80.79, FBS rank being 16th. So they got a lot of guys coming back this year. So we're saying that Jalen Moss technically should be a wash for this year, but I still think he's worth at least putting on the watch list. Definitely, circling the name and highlighting it on there, just because I think if you can get him when no one's paying attention now and just kind of sit on it, it does depend on your roster. I've said it many times on the other podcasts, don't clog your rosters. But if no one's, paying attention to this type of stuff, maybe just for those that are listening or those that kind of deep dive like I do and just look for someone that can kind of carry on the same tradition or carry on the same type of situation that they previously had with another receiver. I'm kind of looking for that situation as well. It's just not going to happen this year because everyone's coming back. So it's going to make Fresno State look hopefully more of a veteran team, and that hopefully bodes well against their opponents and stuff like that. What's your thoughts on, picking waivers and things like that particularly? I know each person has a different strategy. I never really asked you, are you a guy that just puts a lot of people on the watch list, or do you kind of do it like I do and just maybe take them late flyers and drafts, especially with supplemental? If you got like over 16 rounds, are you taking them anyway? What's your thoughts process when it comes to supplemental, freshmen, things like that, particularly with the deep dive?
I mean, honestly, like I said, it comes down to what's the potential within the system and how quickly can you get on the field. Those are the two main things that I look at. If you're in a great system, but I don't think you have any chance of getting on the field anytime soon, then I'm probably going to push you aside for a while and just kind of wait and see how things shake out. But if you have that combination of great system, can get on the field early, then you're somebody that I'm going to be targeting quite often and not letting get to the waiver wires because then somebody else is going to have an equal chance to go snag them up. So yeah.
Yeah, and with Fab, so free agent acquisition budget, pretty much you're out betting for that. Just don't get into bidding wars. What I'm saying is plan ahead. If
Right.
Jalen Moss is a guy that you could see producing here very soon, don't do that as well. But Nate, I want to thank you for coming on to the show, buddy. Doing a deep dive for Oklahoma. If you want, you can tell the listeners and the guys watching what you got coming up. I know we're deep into the CFF guy, but do you got any other sweet articles or anything like percolating that you're got coming up possibly soon?
I spend most of my time working on the guide and the team pages and that type of thing. I've got a few articles that I've got in the very early stages. I'm hoping to be able to get them out this summer, in between some of the stuff we're working on with the guide. So, and then obviously, I stay pretty active on Twitter at CFF Nate. So anybody that wants to talk college football or fantasy football or craft microbrews, feel free to hit me there, and I'll gladly chime in with my opinions.
Yes, Nate's the guy to hit up when you're in different towns. You're like, hey, what's the best brewer to go to? Nate's got you. He
100%.
probably knows. He at least probably knows one or two, maybe in each state. I don't know, maybe West Coast, but he definitely knows currently over here on the East.
Fresno State, Tioga Sequoia is a great microbrewery in Fresno, California. So if the Fresno State fans are listening in towards the end of this to talk about Jalen Moss, go hit up Tioga Sequoia and have a good beer over there.
Yes, and hopefully we might get to travel in the future with the C2C. So if we get to do that, we'll definitely be hitting up each state, and I'll be collecting probably a mug or two and just have a whole 50-state collection. That's the goal, at least. But I want to thank you guys for coming on and listening to the Future Freshman Podcast. Like I said, sorry about the delay. Just had to take a couple weeks off, but we're back. We'll have some other content coming soon. With this Future Freshman Podcast, of course, listen out for the CFFU podcast that returns soon. So just keeping an eye out for that. Of course, CFFI guide is being in the works, so keep an eye out for that in July. And thank you for listening, and be good to each other. Peace.